let's see where to begin. I was trying to figure out how I came to this particular topic and talk, and I finally concluded I it originated in a secondhand store. Um, my wife and I frequently go to make the rounds on the West End of all the secondhand stores just to do something. And at one of them, I happened upon a, they're called great courses. And this particular great course was Axial Age Religions. And I couldn't resist. I figured, oh my gosh, okay, I got to check this out. So that's how this began, I think. And what I'm hoping to do in my talk is look at that period and, well, in looking at it and listening to the course, I felt as though it was like, this is what I'm living right now in a lot of ways. So let me begin. So the axial age, it refers to a period of time uh, which I think different scholars have given it different ranges, but the one that I'm familiar with is 800 to 200 BCE, roughly. The term itself, axial age, was coined by the historian Karl Jaspers. And he picked that because he felt that it signified a very profound shift in both the East and West. And the major religions that we still rely on today for spiritual guidance actually emerged at that time independently of each other in 4 different locations around the world. So in China, for example, Taoism and Confucianism emerged. In Greece, our philosophical tradition emerged. In the Middle East, you had the beginnings of monotheism. And finally, in India, which apparently was a hotbed of exploration, the early formation of Hinduism, Jainism, and of course our own practice, Buddhism, emerged. So this period of our history was, well, it was very tumultuous, I would say, characterized in many places by increasing urbanization. People became more mobile, and this placed increasing pressure on social structures. At the time, I mean, people were largely agrarian, rural, and so you had this increasing consolidation of people, and so it tended to undermine people's sense of identity, what they were about, what life was about, where they were going, and so on and so forth. So this whole spiritual revolution really unfolded against a backdrop of migration, conquest, and just general turmoil. The sages in all of the axial areas or era centers also became increasingly concerned with death. There was an increase in a sense of individuality as people crowded into towns and cities. There were questions about, well, what happens when we die? Where do we go? Do we go anywhere? Or is that it, the end? So there was a lot of searching, I would say. Uh, so that kind of thinking also led to a greater interest in epistemology, or, how do we know what we know? Those kinds of questions. And a greater sense of self-consciousness and an awareness of just what is our place in this universe we live in. So finally, the axial age marked a dramatic change in the function of religion itself. And according to one theologian, John Hicks, he marked the transition as one from religions of cosmic maintenance to religions of personal transformation. So there was a huge shift occurring at that time. And Karen Armstrong, who wrote a book, it's probably 10 years old by now. Nope, older than that. Points out in the introduction to her book, The Great Transformation, and I'm quoting here, "What mattered was not what you believed, but how you behaved. Religion was about doing things that changed you at a profound level. Before the axial age, ritual and animal sacrifice had been central to the religious quest. You experienced the divine in sacred dramas that, like great theatrical experiences today, introduced you to another level of existence. The axial sages changed this. They still valued ritual, but gave it a new ethical significance and put morality at the heart of the spiritual life. The only way you could encounter what they called God, Nirvana, Brahman, or the Way was to live a compassionate life. Indeed, religion was compassion." So, what was going on in India at this time? And as I mentioned, it was a tumultuous period, and so many of these things were occurring in northern India, in the region of the Ganges River. And as I mentioned, society was becoming more urban through a process of consolidation and conquest. There were the rise of monarchies, and the first empires emerge in that region at the expense of older tribal republics. Probably more accurate to say more tribal oligarchic systems, but anyway. So the cities of Magadha and Kosala are prime examples of this emerging empire building. There was also a rising commercial and mercantile class that appeared, along with increasing trade, the use of coinage. So there was a shifting economy as well. And the monarchies, the rising monarchies, were favored by this new class of people because they could stabilize markets, so to speak, maintain trade routes, and so on. And along with urbanization came a host of problems which we're all familiar with: crowding, sanitation, disparities in wealth, and on and on. Pace of life increases. Changes in how people lived became increasingly ill-suited to the old religious forms, which had come out of more of a fixed agricultural society. And people began to lose confidence in the old traditions and the old religious ways. So it's within the context of these changes that the Buddha appears, and in her book, again, a different book by Karen Armstrong, The Buddha. The Buddha was creating an alternative way of life that brought the shortcomings of the new towns and states into sharp focus. I'm kind of on the fence with that statement, to be honest. I've seen references to Buddhism as a reform movement, but it's not clear to me that there was intention there on the Buddha's part to start a reform movement. The Buddha was searching for an end to suffering. My sense is that if his teachings are taken seriously by people and actually incorporated into their lives, that yes, that would change how society functions. But I guess I question her statement that there was some intent there. At any rate, I'll leave it up to you to do your own research and sort that out. So Buddhism marked a transition from the magical thought of the Vedas and the mystical speculations of the Upanishads to a new type of rationality. The Buddha is often referred to more as a physician, and I like that. One who diagnoses a problem and prescribes a way or a solution to that problem. And so a good way to view the Buddha's teachings are as a matter of practical instruction rather than the outcome of mystical speculation. So we have the beginnings of our practice. So when we enter the Zendo, we bow 3 times. In fact, there's an ongoing pattern of 3s in our practice. 3 bows, 3 bows to cushions, and so on and so forth. We're bowing to the 3 treasures of our practice. And this portion of my talk is primarily from Aitken Roshi's Taking the Path of Zen. So the first treasure, the first bow as we enter, is to Buddha. And that refers not only to Shakyamuni Buddha, the enlightened one, but to all the mythological personages that preceded him, all the great teachers of our lineage, down to our own teacher, Edo-san, as well as everyone who has realized his or her Buddha nature. And in a deeper sense, we bow to the yet to be realized Buddha nature that we are. The second treasure, when we come in, we bow to our cushions. The second treasure is the Dharma, which is a very massive concept. It's at once empty and at the same time overflowing with beings and things. Another meaning of Dharma is phenomena, including the thoughts and facts we deduce about the world. In a larger sense, the Dharma also means the truth of Buddhism. The Dharma is the way, the law of the universe, the way things are, the way they behave. It is the reality of the teaching. Finally, the third treasure is Sangha. Now, in pre-Buddhist times, Sangha is not a Buddhist word. The word apparently was in use prior to the Buddha, and it referred to an assembly of some kind. And so there were assemblies of merchants, for example, which could refer to themselves as a Sangha. There were councils to various political leaders, which could also employ that word, it also designated a religious community, and so that's how it's come down to us to refer to our community of practitioners. So, how was the Sangha established? According to tradition, upon his enlightenment, the Buddha thought, who could potentially understand what I've just experienced? And he thought of his two former teachers, Alara Kalama and Udaka Ramaputta, and sought them out, tried to inform them of what this experience he's had, only to find that they had both passed away. And he then remembered the five companions with whom he had shared ascetic practices for a number of years. And he found them at the deer park of Isipatana near Benares. And that evening he delivered his first sermon, which has come down to us as the turning of the wheel of truth. And in that moment, the Buddhist Sangha was established. Ehe Dogen explains that the significance of the three treasures in the following way. Because the Buddha refers to our great master, we therefore take refuge in him. Because the Dharma refers to good spiritual medicine, we take refuge in it. And because the Sangha refers to excellent spiritual friends, we take refuge in them. So the Buddha traveled the Ganges area for upwards of 40 years or more teaching. And in his 80th year, he realized he was approaching the end of his life. And so he gathered his close followers around him to prepare for his passing. Needless to say, there was great apprehension among his followers. Many were asking, how can we continue without our teacher? What do we do? You've been our anchor all of this time. And the Buddha, sensing their distress, summoned Ananda and said, and this particular section here is from a book called The Life of the Buddha by H. Saratissa. And he says, Ananda, what does the Sangha need from me? The law I have taught is clear. There is no secret version of it, distinct from the one I have explained. I have not kept a closed fist on anything. Now I am old, Ananda. I am past 80. So Ananda, let each of you make a refuge for himself, an island, and let their refuge be the law and nothing else. Then the Buddha, addressing Ananda, again made the point that it was not he himself, but what he had taught that mattered. It may be, Ananda, he said, that in some of you the thought will arise, the word of the master is ended, we have no teacher anymore. But that is not the way to look at it, Ananda. The law which I have explained and laid down for you, let that, after I am gone, be your teacher. So, where am I now with all of this? How do I view the Dharma? Basically, the Buddha transmitted the Dharma to the Sangha, and for some 2,000 plus years, it has been transmitted forward from teacher to student, teacher to student, Sangha to Sangha, and so on. I guess in my own simple way, I view the Dharma, what has come to me, being here, that it's twofold. The Dharma includes the teachings of the Buddha, of course, as they're presented in the canonical texts. the writings of our ancestors and the rituals and the liturgy handed down to us. I also see it as the observed experience, functioning reality of the teaching in my life. So let me touch on ritual and liturgy first. I mean, as most of you, as you know, the style of Buddhism we practice here is Soto Zen. And Soto Zen originated in China, was brought to Japan by Eihei Dogen in the 13th century. Our style of practice originated from his teachings. Soto Zen emphasizes a number of things: regular meditation practice, both at home and with a Sangha. It emphasizes studying our conduct through the lens of the Buddhist precepts. It emphasizes studying various source texts and developing a relationship with a teacher. So all of those things are important in our practice. It also emphasizes constancy, and by that I just mean consistently practicing over time, making practice a regular part of our lives. Soto Zen ritual has many forms, including things like chanting, bowing, incense, candles, bells, particular ways of sitting, and walking meditation. A definite schedule and order to our days of practice, as well as an order in the meditation hall. Our practice emphasizes how things are done, and becoming proficient in the forms of practice can be challenging, but once you become proficient, you discover that it is very freeing. There is also an elegant simplicity and beauty to our practice, our practicing together in this way. John Daido Loori writes, "All of Zen rites and rituals are constantly pointing to the same place, to the realization of no separation between the self and the 10,000 things. Zen liturgy is upaya, skillful means. Like all the other areas of training, it functions as a way of uncovering the truth, which is the life of each one of us. Skillful means are necessary because each one of us, just as we are, is already perfect and complete. What we seek is exactly where we stand. But knowing this doesn't do anything. It is not a matter of knowing. It has to be realized as the functioning of our lives. And for practice to function, for liturgy to function, it must first be wholeheartedly engaged." So learning these forms in my mind, in my view, is really a central, integral part of practice. And learning the forms of our practice as they've been passed down to us is an important way to express our gratitude to all those who have practiced before us and practiced this way from generation to generation, so that we have it. It's a gift to us, I guess, is how I see that. Learning and enacting these forms allows the wisdom and experience of our Zen ancestors to be part of our practice today. We sit Zazen alone together. We perform ceremony together as one. Practicing the forms and enacting the liturgy bring to life the Dharma, making visible the invisible. Daido Loori tells us that liturgy is ultimately about intimacy. In liturgy, there is only intimacy. Intimacy means no gaps, no separation, not two. Intimate understanding is not like ordinary understanding. Ordinary understanding is seeing with the eye and hearing with the ear. Intimacy is seeing with the ear and hearing with the eye. How do you see with the ear and hear with the eye? Let go of the eye, and the whole body and mind is nothing but I. Let go of the ear, and the whole universe is nothing but the ear. You will never grasp this by seeing it dualistically, by seeing yourself and it as two separate things. Awareness is much more than the functioning of a single organ of perception, and is even beyond all the organs of perception added together. In true perception, all the senses converge: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. They are one reality, and that reality fills the universe. So now Zazen. And of course, central to our practice here at Olympia Zen Center is Zazen. Here we practice a form of Zazen known as Shikantaza, which literally means Shikan, nothing but, ta, precisely, za, sitting. It's a form of practice in which there are no supportive techniques, such as counting one's breath or focusing on an image or staring at a candle. It is, as the words would say, it's precisely nothing but sitting. This form of Zazen is dwelling in a state of thought-free, alert, wakeful attention. It is not directed toward any object and clings to no content. And according to Dogen Zenji, Shikantaza is the highest and purest form of Zazen. So we all lead busy lives, family, work, relationships, fixing our cars, taking care of our yards, perhaps going to school, dealing with homework, and so on and so forth. Then we come to Zazen, and we sit in silence, our bodies still, in a room that's dimly lit, facing the wall. During Zazen, there is nowhere to go, nothing to do, and perhaps for some, nowhere to escape. We are left to experience ourselves moment by moment. We notice bodily sensations. We notice the activity of our minds. We notice how thoughts and feelings interact, how our bodies respond to certain thought feelings. We notice how easy it is to weave these aspects of ourselves into wonderful stories of all kinds. And we allow these aspects of ourselves to arise and fall away moment by moment. We neither grasp onto those that are pleasant nor attempt to push away those that may be painful. Our practice is to observe this unfolding process, the arising and falling away of thoughts, feelings, stories, and the ways we become caught in them. Like our first physician, we study the anatomy of this process. We unravel our stories, and in time, we begin to unravel ourselves. A kind of disappearing begins to occur. We do not sit Zazen to solve personal problems or issues. Zazen is not a therapeutic technique, as some proponents of mindfulness would have us believe. The point of this observing is not to analyze these aspects of the self, but to cultivate awareness, to deepen our capacity to observe. And as we develop this capacity, we begin to develop a detached, compassionate awareness of our bodies, our thoughts, our feelings. We become familiar with the anatomy of the stories we create, the dramas we participate in. Our habitual conditioning and patterns of thinking and feeling become known and familiar. We become less a mystery to ourselves. We begin to see that we are less human beings and more human becomings. Yet this does not mean the extinction of individuality. Shohaku Okamura tells us, there are two aspects of our lives, independent and interdependent. This is not a matter of separate parts of our life. Our whole life is individual, and at the same time, our whole life is 100% interdependent. There is no separation of the two. This is an important point. We should see both aspects of our life at the same time. This is how we wake up to the reality of our life. A couple pages later, he goes on to say, within this Zazen, individuality is not lost. This is my practice. No one else can sit for me. My sitting is mine alone, and yet within this sitting practice, we let go of our egocentricity. To let go of thought means to let go of our egocentricity. This body and mind is really part of Buddha nature, not something separate. Within this, both ji, form, the many, and ri, emptiness, one, are manifest. Neither is negated, neither is affirmed. Both sides are naturally in this simple practice. That's the meaning of Dogen Zenji's expression, practice and enlightenment are one. So what of OZC and Sangha? I began my talk by discussing the axial age, a time of great upheaval. And if we look around, it's difficult not to see similarities between the age in which our practice began and our current situation here at this time at Olympia Zen Center. Our teacher and the founder of our temple, Ado Francis Carney, is entering retirement and is withdrawing from day-to-day activities at Olympia Zen Center. What's more, our practice leader, Genjo, will be leaving us soon also to continue his training in Japan. So, in a sense, like that first Sangha, we're kind of losing our anchor as well. A cursory viewing of the nightly news quickly reveals that greed, ignorance, and ill will are alive and well in the world. It is clear that we are failing to address critical systemic issues affecting relations among nations, within our own society, and the biosphere on which we all depend. We would do well to heed Sekai Harada Roshi's words. He wrote, I think that as long as there is no coexistence or mutual support among people, mankind will become extinct in the 21st century. As long as there is only one Earth, the situation in any country has implications for the whole world. Similarly, if one country is selfish in the way it thinks or in its scientific research, this can bring about the destruction of both human beings and the Earth itself. The sufferings and deluding passions of human beings, namely greed, anger, and ignorance, cannot be halted by reason or education. Only by awakening to the law of causality is it possible to stop them. I, for some reason, keep coming back to that quote. It's one of the few times I've read something from a teacher that is so blunt about our condition, our situation. And I guess I appreciate he doesn't pull any punches. We've heard in previous talks, Sangha described as a supremely rich field, meriting respect and veneration, because it is the purpose of Sangha to guide people in faith and practice, and to ultimately bring about their release from the cycles of birth and death. So in fulfilling this role, Sangha is taking the place of Buddha, who is not physically present and manifests the teachings of the Dharma in the world. But another important function of Sangha is to transmit the Dharma correctly and in an unbroken flow to future generations. To fulfill this function, Sangha members must themselves practice the Buddha way. Sangha is the harmony of Buddha and Dharma, and all these functions of the Sangha must be complete if Buddhism is to flourish into the future. While in some modern streams of Buddhism, Sangha still refers only to monks and nuns as a group, according to Aitken Roshi. In Zen Buddhism, the Sangha has always been more than clergy, more than a group of believers, more than just Buddhists. The Sangha is in fact the kinship of all things, every entity of this universe and of all universes, past, present, and future, in endless dimensions. It is to the enlightenment of this total Sangha that we are dedicated in our vows. I really love that particular explanation of Sangha. I cannot say how many crises facing the world will play out in the coming years. I don't know that anyone knows. To paraphrase Roy Scranton, in many ways I feel that we are living between the winds we have sown and the whirlwind we will reap. I still feel like we can go to the store and buy food. I can go at will and visit friends and so on. I don't know what the future will bring. I can say that in this place of practice, we have been given an opportunity, a wonderful opportunity to cultivate really an alternative way of being human in the world. I believe, yes, a world in which the teachings of our ancestors can be nurtured and developed. And in the process, acknowledge and embrace our kinship with all beings. We need only diligently practice as our teachers have taught us to make it so. I'll end with something Karen Armstrong wrote, observed in her book, The Buddha. The Sangha is one of the oldest surviving voluntary institutions on earth. Its endurance tells us something important about humanity and human life. The great empires manned by vast armies of soldiers have all crumbled, but the community of bhikkhus has lasted some 2,500 years. It is a polarity adumbrated in the early Buddhist legends that juxtapose the Buddha with the Kakavati, the world rulers. The message seems to be that it is not by protecting and defending yourself that you survive, but by giving yourselves away. So tag, we're it. Thank you. Beings are